Good afternoon. I'm going to present the work on moisture sorption isotherms of coriander leaves and estimation of shelf life of dried coriander leaves, Coriandrum sativum. This work was developed by Rose Tchonkouang, Angel Borges, and Margarida Vieira, belonging to the Higher Institute of Engineering of University of Algarve. Coriander is an annual herbaceous plant that belongs to the family AMB, and its green young leaves are commonly used in the Mediterranean diet as garnishes and spices. The fresh coriander leaves are very rich in vitamin C, about 135 milligrams per 100 grams, and it also contains essential oils such as limpan, coriandrin, geraniol, citronellol, alpha-pinene, flavonoids, catechin, gallic acid, vicinin, linalool, etc. So it's very rich in essential oils. Its various parts, such as the seeds, the leaves, the flowers, and the fruits, also possess antioxidant, anticonvulsant, antidiabetic, anti-mutagenic, antimicrobial, antifungal, antibacterial, sedative, hypnotic, diuretic, stomatic, spasmodic, and carminative activities. However, fresh coriander has a problem. It is very perishable. So drying it can be an alternative, but we have to figure out its shelf life, and of course in different environments and with different packaging materials. When dealing with shelf life, it's very important to know the water activity, because it controls the water migration, and especially in food that is sensitive to humidity, it's a great tool that can be used to ensure the product safety while maximizing the shelf life. It can help control attributes such as texture, flavor, appearance, as well as to characterize the physical, the chemical, and the microbial stability. Food moisture sorption isotherms describe the thermodynamic relationship between the water activity and the equilibrium moisture content of a food product at constant temperature and pressure. And the knowledge and understanding of these moisture sorption isotherms is very important in food technology, once it is a great help for the design and optimization of drying equipment, to design packaging, and to predict shelf life. The sorption isotherms are commonly described by mathematical models based on empirical and/or theoretical criteria, and there is a large number of isotherm models available, and that can be characterized into various groups. We have the kinetic models based on an absorbed monolayer of water, BET model, the kinetic models based on a multi-layer and condensed film, the GAB model is an example, the semi-empirical, the Holcim model, which we'll talk about later, and the purely empirical models such as Oswin and Smith models. Moisture isotherms are unique for every material and must be, of course, evaluated experimentally. So when a product is exposed to an environment with a high or low humidity environment, and it's sensitive to it, the changes in water activity by absorption or desorption will occur and give rise to undesirable or even desirable changes in shelf life. These changes can be chemical, physical, or microbiological, and if we understand and keep the critical water activity level of a food product through suitable packaging, this will extend shelf life. So the objectives of this work was to obtain experimental data to develop moisture sorption isotherms for dried and fresh coriander leaves, and to estimate the shelf life of dried coriander leaves in different packaging materials. We started by evaluating the initial moisture content, We used duplicates of the samples of fresh and dried coriander. 1.5 to 2 grams were weighed, initial weight, and then they were placed in metal plates and transferred to an oven to dry, and the dried samples were weighed again, and this was the weight of the dry matter. So the initial moisture was calculated according to this formula. To estimate the equilibrium moisture content, we placed triplicates of samples of fresh leaves and of dried leaves in 5 desiccators, each one containing a different saturated solution of a salt that creates a different relative humidity environment. For instance, lithium chloride creates an environment of 11% relative humidity, magnesium chloride 33%, etc. So we did this for the fresh and again for the dried leaves, and they were weighed regularly until equilibrium was reached. That is to be when the weights would not change anymore. By then, the sample were weighed. The final weight was considered to be WE, and the equilibrium moisture content, or ME, was evaluated in the same way as described to MI. We also measured for all these samples the water activity with an hygrolab hygroscope. We used 2 different packaging materials, a polyethylene and also a laminate of polyamide, ethyl vinyl alcohol polyethylene. So we needed to know the permeability of these materials. We first built small pouches that were 10 centimeters width per 15 centimeters length, and the pouches were filled with silica gel and stored in the desiccators. The samples were weighed every day until also stabilization was reached of its weight, and this assay was also performed in triplicate for each plastic material at room temperature and with a humidity of 100% relative humidity. So the weight was plotted against time for each of the pouches, and then the water vapor transmission rate was estimated by dividing the slope of these straight lines, the average of the slope of these straight lines, by the area of the plastic pouch. To estimate the permeability, the water vapor transmission was divided by the saturated pressure and multiplied by thickness. Moving now to the presentation of the results. The MI for the fresh coriander was 14.28 grams of water per grams of dry matter, and for the dried coriander, 0.16 grams of water per gram of dry matter. The water vapor transmission rate was for the laminate PA, ethylene vinyl alcohol PE, 2.1, and for polyethylene only 5.9, and the water vapor permeability was for the laminate 39.1 and for polyethylene 54.5. As for the moisture sorption isotherm data, they are presented here. The crosses are for the dry coriander and the stars for the fresh coriander. Several models were tried, and the one that presented the best fit was chosen. So we tried the Iglesias-Shirif model, the Smith model, the Oswin. So we tried Cowrie, Halsey, and Anderson as well, and Cowrie proved to present the best fit to the dried coriander leaves, and Halsey the best fit to the fresh coriander leaves. Our choice was based on the R squared and the adjusted R squared being closest to 1, and on the root mean square error being the lowest. This is the plot of the equilibrium moisture content against water activity with our data, experimental data, and the models, the Halsey model for the fresh and the Curry model for the dried coriander leaves. And next, we estimated the shelf life of the dried coriander leaves. Shelf life is here represented by theta S, and in this expression we needed the weight of dry solids, L is thickness, B is the slope of the linear part of the moisture sorption isotherm, WVP is the water vapor permeability of the plastic films used, A is the surface area of the plastic package, P0 is the vapor pressure of pure water at the storage temperature, and MC the critical moisture, or that is to be the moisture of the product that before being unaccepted by the consumer. So we considered the linear part of the isotherm, and we estimated the B, the slope of this linear part. So the shelf life was calculated under the following conditions. For solids of 50 grams, an area of 0.03 square meters, and a thickness of 30 micrometers, a partial pressure of 3.17, and a slope of 0.63. The humidity moisture content at storage was set at 70%, and the MC, the critical moisture, was calculated by the assumption that the product would be undesirable when the AW reached 0.6. This AW and coefficients A and B replaced in the Curry equation to obtain the equilibrium moisture value, which would be the critical value content that was found to be 22.7%. So for polyethylene, our shelf life would be 24 days, and for the laminate, the shelf life estimated was 34 days. This one stored at 70% relative. So concluding, MSI did not exhibit sigmoidal behaviors typically seen in plant products, but we could see in the desorption curve of fresh coriander an inflection point which is commonly observed in isotherms for most plant products. The experimental results show hysteresis in the sorption-desorption isotherms. The Curry model presented the best fit to the experimental data of dried coriander leaves. The Halsey model presented the best fit to the experimental data of fresh coriander leaves, and it was demonstrated that coriander leaves that were packed in the laminate PA Evo PE film with a WVP of 39.1 would have a longer shelf life, 34 days, compared to the coriander leaves packed in PE film, which would be 24 days. I present here the references consulted during this work, and I'm happy to answer to any questions. Thank you very much.